May the Lord give you his peace. We're now entering into our third class, and in this third class we're going to continue discussing the various Franciscan sources from which we come to know and understand the life and times of St. Francis. And so we already looked at the Prima Vita, the first life written of St. Francis, and we looked at the Sacrum Commercium, or the secret romance of St. Francis with Lady Poverty. In this next part, we're going to talk about the Vita Secunda. This is the life of St. Francis by Blessed Thomas of Celano once again. It's his second biography about St. Francis. Now, in the general chapter of Genoa, in 1244, I should mention what a general chapter is. And so what a general chapter is when all the friars from around the world gather together to one place to discuss the direction of the order. They can make various disciplinary decisions. They elect the new minister general. They can make various things like that, so decisions and so forth. So it's the highest governing body of a religious order is the general chapter. Now delegates are sent to it because everyone throughout the world can't make it to one spot in the world. There's too many of us and we're too spread out throughout the whole world. But in the town of Genoa, or the city of Genoa in 1244, there was a chapter. All the friars gathered. And again, this is now 8 years after the death of St. Francis. 5 years after Blessed Thomas of Celano wrote the first life of St. Francis. And so the new minister general, whose name is Crescentius of Jesi, Crescentius, C-R-E-S-C-N-T-I-U-S, Crescentius of Jesi, Jesi, J-E-S-I. So he commanded all the friars to send him in writing whatever they could know with certainty about the life, signs, and wonders of Blessed Francis. So here you have the Minister General who is calling on the brothers who are still alive, who knew Francis, to send him everything they got on him. He wants to know, he wants a greater picture. He wants the friars to really reach down deep their memory and bring it forth so that they have a good understanding of their seraphic father. Again, it's 8 years after Francis's death, so this is an important moment for the life of the community. Now, a couple of brothers got together to work on it together. Brother Leo, who was Francis's companion and confessor. Brother Rufino, the cousin to St. Clare, who was a nobleman. Brother Angelo Tancredi. Brother Angelo was a former knight and one of the first companions of Francis with Rufino. Leo came a little bit later than those two. So these three get together and they submit their account to Brother Crescentius. Now, this will be known as the legend of the three companions. Historically, it's unsure about what date. There's a cover letter to it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But they write and they sent it in. The legend of the three companions as it's now known. So sometime between 1244 at the chapter Genoa and 1247, sometime in those 3 years, Thomas was commissioned, Blessed Thomas of Celano, was commissioned by the Minister General, Brother Crescentius, to write the life of St. Francis using the new material. So basically he kind of called it Blessed Thomas of Celano and said, hey, listen, you did a great job writing the life of Francis. But the brothers aren't completely happy with it. There's some more stuff we want to give you. Here, give us another biography. And so Blessed Thomas of Celano takes everything he got and goes back to work, commissioned to write the Vita Secunda, the second life of Francis, or his second biography about St. Francis. Okay? So this second life of Francis was delivered to the general chapter, which was held in the Lyons, on July 13th, 1247. So we're talking 11 years after the death of Francis. 1247. So we're talking 21 years after the death of Francis. We have the presentation of this material. So Crescentius was removed due to his insufficiencies and replaced by John of Parma. And we'll talk about John a little bit later. But so the new Minister General is John of Parma. Okay? So this work is also called, this Vita Secunda, the second life, is also called the Memoriale in Desiderio Anime. So the memorial of the desire of his soul. So this is kind of his nickname for it. Okay? It opens with a prologue of how it came to be written. And it closes with a dedication to the Minister General Crescentius. So God bless, our brother, Blessed Thomas of Celano. He mentions how it came to be, and then he ends by basically honoring Crescentius of Jesi, who had been removed from office because of some difficulties within the order, which we will see when we do Franciscan history. Okay? So it's divided into 2 books, this next volume. The first book is short and covers most of the material of the first book of the First Life. So the naming of Francis at baptism, the conversion of Francis, the founding of the order, the appointment of Cardinal Ugolino as protector of the order. It's written mostly as a supplement to the First Life. Repeats but adds details. So it's pretty much the same thing with a little bit of details here and there thrown in. The second book treats of various subjects in a systematic and logical arrangement. So Thomas's intention is to bring out what was good and acceptable will of Francis, both for himself and for his followers, in every practice of heavenly discipline and zeal for the highest perfection which he ever had toward God in his sacred affections and toward man in his examples. Let me read that again, because this is what Thomas of Celano says about why he's writing the second book, what he's looking to do. He wants to bring out what was the good and acceptable will of Francis, both for himself and for his followers, in every practice of heavenly discipline and zeal for the highest perfection, which he ever had toward God in his sacred affections and toward man in his examples. And so Thomas gives us a good feel of why he's doing what he's doing. So certain miracles were inserted. The latter part of the second book returns to the chronological order of Francis's illness, the stigmata, the death, the canonization, and this time he includes the transition of the body to the basilica. Okay? Now, our next book we look at, we have, so the first, the second, and the third. Now look at the next book. This is called the Tractus de Miraculis Beati Francisci. Again, written by Blessed Thomas of Celano. It's called the Treatise on the Miracles of Blessed Francis. The Treatise on the Miracles of Blessed Francis. So the Second Life was considered deficient because it only covered a few miracles when Francis was alive. So the new Minister General, John of Parma, commanded Thomas to correct the defect. And so he corrected it by writing this treatise on the miracles. So it's written between 1250 and 1253. The treatise was accepted at the next general chapter in Metz, M-E-T-Z, not M-E-T-S, you New Yorker fans. The chapter of Metz in 1254. There's 198 paragraphs. Opening chapter deals with the miraculous beginning of the order. Second chapter deals with the stigmata and miracles related to the wounds of St. Francis, which is pretty significant when you think about Francis and the stigmata and the significance of the miracles attached to his stigmata. The third and the following chapters, except chapter 6, deal with miracles mostly after the death of Francis, mostly after. Chapter 6 is concerned with Lady Jacoba of Setzley and her visit to Francis before his death. So Celano has, broken down into 3 parts, but there's one little chapter he exerts, pulls out, and he talks about how Lady Jacoba, whom Francis called Brother Jacoba, a member of the sect of the Franciscans who took care of Francis when he came to Rome. She was a mother of 2 senators. We'll talk about her later. She provided the wool for the friars for their habits, and her visit to Francis. There's one little chapter about her, so just pointing out the importance of this woman and her place in Franciscan life. So most of the treatise is not new material. 41 of the 198 paragraphs relate to miracles when Francis was still alive. Only 13 paragraphs contain new material. So there really wasn't too much added on, but sufficient for us who want to study Francis to learn a little bit more about our seraphic father and his great miracles. Now we look at the next book written about St. Francis called the Legenda Maggiore by St. Bonaventure. So this is called The Great Legend of the Life of St. Francis. The Great Legend of the Life of St. Francis by St. Bonaventure of Bagnoregio. So the general chapter of Narbonne, N-A-R-B-O-N-E. The general chapter of Narbonne in 1260 ordered a good legend of the life of Francis to be written based upon those already in existence. So, it's some years after the last writing had happened. They want another book on the life of Francis, and they want something a little bit more, a little bit more close. I don't know, just something a bit more, I guess you'd say. And so there was some turmoil going on in the order, over Francis's ideals, and so they're looking for some more info, okay? So the work was entrusted to the Minister General himself. So the guy in charge of a couple of 100,000 friars, or tens of thousands of friars, has to now write a book about St. Francis while he's trying to administer the entire community. So the text was approved in the year 1263. In 1266, now this is 40 years after the death of Francis, okay? In 1266, it was prescribed as the only canonical, definitive, and exclusive text. The only canonical, definitive, and exclusive text with the order that all early biographies be burned. So they basically said, this is it. This is what we're going with. This is the official biography. Take Celano 1, take Celano 2, take that Legend of the Three Companions, and take that other, the Romance of Lady Poverty, and throw it in the fire. Now, being good, obedient friars, they didn't do it. Thanks be to our Lord and God, they didn't do it. Because had they done it, we'd be in bad shape. We wouldn't have Celano, and we wouldn't know what was going on there. So thanks be to God, the friars were disobedient on that one, okay? So the circumstances surrounding this. 40 years after Francis's death, the order was being reorganized, as we'll see later in class. A considerable literary production of Messianic renewal was happening. So there was all this end time stuff going on in the regular secular world or in the religious life world. And so there was a need to kind of weed manage the boat through that, okay? The extensions of St. Francis' feast to the entire church affected it. So now the entire church, 40 years after Francis' death, was now celebrating Francis liturgically. So they needed something to go on, a little bit more meat and substance than what was given to them by Celano. So they actually would require that every friary or chapter compose a choral legend, something that could be read during the hours of the divine office, during the octave of Francis, in preparation for his feast day. So they could be read at a regular basis. They needed a choral legend, another thing that Bonaventure will work on. So the person and the ideal of St. Francis emerged with great difficulty from the lost writings. And so as a result, people wanted a complete and succinct work. And so there was a feud going on between the spirituals who wanted to live the rule radically the way Francis lived it, and the friars of the community who wanted to make mitigations to the rule. And so during this controversy, the writings of St. Francis was adding fuel to it, so they wanted a writing that would bring peace between the two and make it one big happy family altogether. Okay? So the relationship between the friars, university clergy at Paris, and the parish priests, there was tension there. And tension was growing. As the friars were taking upon more and more pastoral ministry, it created tension. As the friars began to teach in the universities and students wanted to listen to the friars because, quite honestly, they were good teachers, it caused controversy with the university staff. And so some of the clergy began to regard complete poverty as evil. Some clergy contested friars' right to preach and hear confessions. Some clergy denied that St. Francis ever had the stigmata. And some, they said, some maliciously attacked and misinterpreted and misrepresented the testament of Francis. So all this needed to be cleared up. And needed to be explained, which is, one of the reasons why St. Bonaventure will spend so much time on the stigmata is because there was so much controversy surrounding the stigmata. And Bonaventure will have to defend the order as he writes the life of Francis. He'll have to defend poverty. He'll have to defend the friar's right to preach. So when he's writing St. Francis's life, there is a bit of political writing in there. Now, he's not lying. He's not telling us false things about Francis. He's emphasizing certain parts of Francis's life in order to bring peace within the order, peace with the friars in the university, peace with the friars in the clergy, peace with the friars in the church. And so it was very, very important. Okay? Now, historically, the chronology was not Bonaventure's concern. He didn't care about the chronology, as we mentioned earlier with Thomas Celano. There's certain anecdotes that precede each other by vague formulas. So you'll often see the words, "one day he said," or you'll see, "at another time," or "a short time elapsed and then." So he uses these little phrases to introduce things that Francis said and did. Very common in Bonaventure's writing and his style of writing. The work is a compilation of basic documents which Bonaventure reworked, rethought, regrouped, and presented in a different form. So there's no real new material, it's just the way in which it's being presented in Bonaventure's style. He's most concerned with the souls of the past. The souls of the past. Bonaventure does provide certain details and episodes and insights. And so, and it concerns himself with those people of the past and so forth, the souls of the past. So it's very beautiful, beautiful writing. Now, Bonaventure is a pacifier. And I mean that in a good sense. When you think the word pacifier, we think bad. But no, it's good. He was a good pacifier, a peacemaker. So Bonaventure compares the beginning of the order to the early church. He modeled his style on that of St. Luke. St. Bonaventure had a great, great love of St. Luke. He wrote 3 volumes on his commentary on St. Luke. He loved St. Luke. And so he models his writing on that of St. Luke the Apostle, the gospel writer. His primary concern was to present the pacifying activity of Francis. So Francis restoring peace to communities. Francis restoring peace to cities. Francis adopting the formula of the greeting, "May the Lord give you his peace." The idea was to end the friars in quarreling with themselves and with others. He wants to put St. Francis out there to the rest of the church as a man of peace, as the great peacemaker. Francis did not write the prayer, "Make me a channel of your peace," but it certainly captures Francis's life, especially when you read it in light of Bonaventure, and Bonaventure putting Francis out there as the great peacemaker. So Bonaventure recognized the sanctity of Francis's first companions and their value as witnesses. Even though the spiritual ideal of the rule was hijacked, Bonaventure can maneuver through all that and represent those early followers as men most faithful to the gospel and to Francis. There's an unsparing praise of St. Clare. When Bonaventure writes about St. Clare, second to none. He doesn't spare in praising her. And he made use of the Poor Ladies of San Damiano, the Poor Clare sisters, as part of his writings. He never names Elias, who is the champion of the conventuals. He only calls him the vicar of the saint. He'll never mention Elias by name. Bonaventure, he puts a certain exaggeration on Francis in the sense where he runs the risk of scandalizing the over-scrupulous, and he omits details that could have added fresh fuel to the controversy. So when he's writing, he's trying to steer away from anything that could cause problems between the friars. He doesn't rework the story of what happened. He puts it in a different context so that the friars don't take that and use it in the wrong